Hello, Kayleigh Graham. I am so excited to talk to you today. Listeners, you are in for a treat. So I am being joined by Kayleigh. She is Head of Partnerships at Telaroo, speaker, DEI champion and columnist, amongst other accolades. Kayleigh, welcome. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about you?
Hello, good morning. Thank you for having me. A little bit about me. I'm head of partnerships and growth here at Telaroo, where we support accountants and business owners to streamline rather painful payment processes. But as you mentioned, outside of that, I am a very busy lady doing multiple other things and predominantly talking about diversity and inclusion within the accounting and finance industry, but also writing about that and generally talking about culture and the needs of people within businesses.
Wow. So your story is really interesting because you have really kind of changed the narrative, haven't you? And I would say gone on your own individual journey. So take us back to kind of how it started. So you joined NatWest.
Yes, I was a young, enthusiastic 17-year-old, and the plan was initially go to university, study medicine, and go down that route. But actually, I got to college and I just didn't really enjoy it. And so it was a case of what can I do instead? My parents were definitely on the stricter side. And so just dropping out with no plan wasn't really an option. So I started looking into alternatives and by accident, effectively, came across an apprenticeship at NatWest in commercial banking. And I had no idea what commercial banking was, but it sounded good. It was NatWest. That was a reputable name. And so I kind of looked into that. And actually, one thing that they did really well was set out a really clear description of what your job would be doing. And that's what got me interested to apply in the first place. And it was around supporting businesses with all of their needs and understanding how they operate and what kind of financial systems, tools, and etc. could be offered to them to support them. And as I say, I didn't really know what any of that meant, but it sounded quite interesting. And so I applied, and they put you through a lengthy old application and interview process. Out of 5,000 people, I got a job, which was very, very exciting. Joined there, did an apprenticeship for 18 months or so, and then was looking for something new. What I was doing was great. The team I worked in was great, but I knew there was more available. I was very fortunate early on to have access to some pretty senior women at the bank at the time, and they had kind of exposed me to various other opportunities. And so I was off. I wanted something new, and I applied for a job in corporate banking in London at NatWest. So at the time, I was living and working down near Brighton, and I applied for this job in London, got my initial interview, went along, had no idea really what to expect, and I went to 250 Bishopsgate, which is the big like flagship NatWest building, and went along, had this interview, was absolutely petrified, was the youngest person to interview. And they kind of said, what are you going to bring to this? And I was like, enthusiasm, and I'll learn fast. And got a call saying I'd got the job. And that really was the start of, I would say, the exciting bit of the journey, right? Which was then moving to corporate, which I ended up hating. I was only there 6 months, absolutely hated it. Thought that's what I wanted, thought the big flashy corporate job was gonna be what I wanted. Absolutely hated it, and was again like, I don't want to be here, I want to do something else. And was very fortunate that NatWest at the time was putting a lot of time and effort into their additional projects. I've actually, funny enough, got the water bottle here that goes through all of their additional projects that they had on the
Bit
go
of
at the
merch.
time. Exactly that. Lots of them not around anymore, unfortunately. But at the time, they pumped a lot of money and moved across to a company called Esme. And that's when I had a real role change. I went from commercial and corporate banking to moving to Esme. And my initial title was Assistant Director of Strategic Projects. And if you're wondering what that means, me too. But the idea was there were going to be some projects, and that's what I was going to help with. And I was super excited, moved across. Naturally, in any kind of startup business, we pivoted and we changed direction. And that meant starting to work with external third party intermediaries. For us, it was brokers. And our CEO at the time said, here's the Southwestern Wales, go and build and introduce a network. And I said, okay. And that's what I went and did. I built an introducer network for the Southwestern Wales, producing about £1 million a month in debt being raised on that side. Again, super exciting. Was there about a year and then left, went somewhere else for a new challenge. And that's when I started working with accountants. So nearly 5 years ago now, started working with accountants, fell in love with it, which if you told me at 17 I'd work with accountants and quite enjoy it, I probably would have laughed.
There's such a
But that's
stigma
what I
for
do now.
accountants.
100%. We're overcoming it. But Started working with accountants initially on raising debt and capital for their clients, but really fell in love with, I guess, the impact that they can have on businesses. So in banking, I was able to have that impact one on one. I was working with the businesses, I was able to do that myself. But starting to work with accountants and seeing how many clients they have access to and the data that they have access to and the impact that they can have on business owners, I fell in love with enabling accountants to be able to do that really, really well, whether that was on upskilling them on whatever topic, whatever product it was that I was sitting with at the time, through to actually the kind of diversity, equity, inclusion piece, which is if you can get the best out of your people, they're going to continue to deliver for your clients. And that's how we get to the best result. But yeah, that's a very long winded way to say that's how I ended up eventually at Deliveroo.
Mean, wow. I mean, you've really just kind of very speedily climbed what a lot of people would view as a tough career ladder, particularly a
Yeah,
tough industry,
yeah,
specifically banking. And you've really kind of just gone for it, haven't you? You can see your energy when you talk. You can see you're kind of bubbling over with passion for what you do, but you haven't always had it easy. And I think it's be lovely to hear a bit about, some of those tough moments as well, because, you've hustled.
yeah, 100%. I think I definitely, I'm at a point now where I kind of romanticize that journey a little bit, right? And I think that's important in some ways to show that it is doable and that it is possible. I always say I was 17 when I joined, I'm 25 now, about to be 26. And so that journey has been quite steep, right? And I've definitely romanticized it. But the reality is it definitely wasn't always that easy, right? My move to corporate was probably the most difficult. I think I just turned 19, was the youngest person in the team. And we had graduates who were all significantly older than me that I was being asked to train on systems, etc. There were a lot of people that had spent a lot of time trying to get to that job, right? And they were in their late 30s, early 40s doing that job. And there was definitely, looking back, there was definitely resentment towards me for that. At the time, I think I just felt a little bit iced out and I didn't really understand what the issue was. But I think there were a lot of misconceptions about why I was there. I think I said to you when we initially spoke, before doing this, someone asked me outright, "Who did you sleep with for this job?" And I was like flabbergasted. Like, what do you mean? Like, is that something that happens? I assumed that was in like movies and stuff, but there was literally someone outright asked me, and I was dumbfounded. I didn't really know what to say. I was like, no one, right? But the reality is, did that person believe me? Probably not. Did they go and talk about that with other people? Probably. And it made it really, really hard because the reality is I'd worked hard. I clearly had the skills to do the job, and that's why they'd given it to me. But I didn't always feel like that was respected across the team. And I definitely felt at many points that I had to work two, three, four, five times harder and really shout about what I was doing to get the recognition for it. Now, that said, I
Mm.
think that's quite powerful because typically, particularly as women, we don't take credit for our successes. There's a real habit in women to downplay our success and talk about the team. And I couldn't have done it without this person. I couldn't have done it without that person. And that typically comes from the fact that success is not correlated with likability for women, right? And so we do it to make sure that we are still a team player and people still like us. And this is why I say it was difficult, but it was almost in some ways a hidden gem for me because I didn't feel like I was liked in that team anyway. I didn't necessarily play into that trying to be liked. I kind of accepted that I maybe didn't fit in there, and that meant that I worked really hard, but I also shouted about my successes. And I think that's what got me the recognition to then be offered the other opportunities. And so in a roundabout way, whilst it wasn't enjoyable, it taught me very early on to own my own success, to talk about that, and to become really confident in doing so. And that's something that I've carried forward. And there have definitely been people that have taken that as arrogance, or it's played into that like success likability thing where that hasn't necessarily played out in the way that lots of people would like, but it has made me super confident in talking about what I do and what I do well, and being able to own that and seize opportunities off the back of it.
And you are a speaker as well, so you talk a lot about DEI, but do you find actually that experience has also been very relatable for people that come across adversity due to age, due to gender, due to colour? Is there been some strong themes coming through around that and people going, I felt like exactly that?
Definitely. I think a lot of people feel these things, but they don't want to talk about them. And then again, me putting myself out there and talking about these things has created a safe space for other people to do that. So quite often when I now speak at events, my messages on LinkedIn, etc., afterwards are flooded with people asking questions that they weren't brave enough to ask in person because they didn't
Yeah.
want someone to see them ask that question. But what's happening now is that people are asking those questions in person. And there's been a real shift in that. So when I first spoke about it was initially around race in the accounting industry in 2020. I put an article out and the comments were absolutely horrendous. People tore me to shreds and it was tough in terms of the backlash on that. But actually now, when I speak at accounting events, they're packed out. There's people standing around the edge, there's people asking questions, there's people engaging. And that to me is all the positive affirmation that I need that this is the right thing to be doing because people are talking about it, people are engaging. The people that are running these events are reaching out to me and saying, hey, we need to talk about this. We need to make sure that this is at the forefront of conversation. People are being forced to confront these things and to do things about them. And there's kind of two camps I feel like people are falling into at the moment. One is those that are really engaged and proactive and want to talk about these things and want to challenge them and want to do things. And the others are those that feel they have to because it looks bad if they don't. But what I say is, even if you're in that camp, you're still doing something. And that's better than nothing. Even if you're only doing it because it looks good, you don't want to be called out for not doing it, you're still moving in the right direction. And what will
You're still in the
happen
room
is that
listening.
eventually, exactly that, whether you
Yeah.
want to be there or not, you're there, you're listening, you're head nodding, you may be taking away one thing, and that is still progress.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, your tenacity, enthusiasm, even in the face of, probably quite some unkind things. And so, I mean, the statement you shared earlier is just not being racist is not enough. I think you said to me, moving to anti-racism and proactive anti-racism and being clear around that. Tell me a bit about the conversation on, some of the things around one of the most powerful things you shared with me was like, I'm driving revenue of a multi-million business.
Yeah,
Why is
scary.
anyone questioning what my place is here? And do you think that, I mean, that happens a lot for women, but for a young woman as well, that must be even more scary, like you said?
100%. I think this comes back to the piece quite early on, which we've just had National Apprenticeship Week, and I always thank my apprenticeship for teaching me the importance of having evidence for the things that I'm doing. Because from day one at NatWest, anything I did needed to be documented. I had to write case studies, etc. And so I became really good at thinking about what I was doing, what the outcome was, what the impact was, and writing that down and
Proof
having to get
points.
feedback from peers. Exactly that, right? And so doing that from day one in career has meant that I've carried that the whole way through. And so people, one of the questions you often get, and I'm sure you've had this as a successful woman, one of the questions you get is, how do you overcome imposter syndrome? It's like number one question anyone wants to ask. And I always say to people, I actually don't think I have imposter syndrome. And that gets mixed responses of people going, oh, that's quite arrogant. And other people go, oh, fair enough. But I say this because everything I've done, I've had the evidence as to how I've got there, why I've achieved it, and why I've been offered the next thing. And so imposter syndrome typically comes from not having that, right? From feeling like you're out of place, from feeling like you don't have the skills to do that. But I've consistently built an undeniable stack of evidence as to why I am where I am and why I'm doing what I'm doing.
I
And
love
so
it.
I just don't feel like I have that. Don't get me wrong, everyone has moments of self doubt, of lower confidence, etc. But I think there is a distinct difference between that and imposter syndrome.
I mean, I'm about to give away a free coaching tip because I often coach women that have imposter syndrome and I say to them, collect the evidence, put it in a
Yeah,
folder on your laptop, put it on a piece of paper and stick it in a jar and look at
yeah,
it, read it, repeat.
100%,
Because remind yourself
100%.
why you're there in the first place. Remind yourself of the incredible value that you bring. And you can only do that, right? By having the evidence in front of you and viewing it because visual
100%.
is better than somebody
Yeah,
else telling you. And you're also that just a
absolutely.
little thumbs up there for my own coaching tip.
Absolutely. I've got literally on my background on my computer screen above has got screenshots from emails and feedback and things like that literally on it. My board to the left of that has got thank you cards and things like that. And that is the stuff that I appreciate. For some people, it feels quite uncomfortable. It feels really egotistical, but that's the stuff that motivates you, that drives you, that when you go, oh God, I don't know what I'm doing, go, actually, yeah, I do. Maybe I'm stuck in this moment, but I do know what I'm doing.
But if we flip the narrative on that, I think a lot of probably my generation, I'm much older than you, unfortunately, have always sought validation externally. So we've always been taught to find that validation, right? And that now I talk about self-love and confidence building is about telling yourself that you're brilliant. Nothing egotistical in that.
100%.
It's about really just caring for yourself and that inner voice. So
Definitely.
you are not on a board yet, but you are kind of there aren't you?
Yes, we at Tallery, we don't have an official board. Our official board is literally our CEO talking to himself in the mirror currently. But we do have we have what I call a pretend board, which is our like senior leadership team, right? So it's myself, our COO, our CEO, our like head of marketing, and our head of compliance, right? And that effectively acts as our board. And we have what are effectively board meetings from like an agenda perspective and what we're covering, etc. So not officially, but doing a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah. So what top tips would you give for somebody like you're perhaps definitely a young person coming through an apprenticeship? We're definitely everybody's going to be carrying evidence now. Something you can later rely on in court.
Absolutely.
Tell me what your sort of top 2 or 3 tips would be in going for those spaces and feeling confident going for those spaces. What would you advise people in similar to you that are going on that journey?
I think the number one thing I would say is don't be afraid to ask questions. I think we hear that quite a lot, but even then, they're cautious of the questions they ask. They want to come up with really well curated, thoughtful questions that make them sound really, really educated and like they know what they're talking about. I am the biggest advocate for asking the simple questions, like very, very simple. Like this morning, I messaged our COO and was like, how do I connect this app to this app? Right. And he was like, you can't. Okay, cool. And there are a lot of people that would be afraid to ask that question because, oh, I should be able to figure that out. But actually, I think in asking what are sometimes the obvious questions, asking things that are sometimes that, am I being silly for asking this? I think you put yourself in a position of vulnerability where you are open to showing that you don't know things and open to learning new things. But I also think that in asking those questions, some of the best breakthroughs we've had have been from asking really basic questions of like, sorry, let's just go back to the start. Why are we doing this? And actually going back and unearthing what it is we're trying to achieve has meant that we've gone, right, well, we've gone really round the houses about trying to figure this out. We could have just gone from A to B. And we found a really simple solution to that just from asking what seemed a silly question. And so that to me has been how I've learnt the most. It's been how I've progressed the most because I've never been afraid to put my hand up and go, I don't know. I don't know what's going on here. What are we doing? What does that mean? What does this mean? And people have really, really taken to that. And again, I think it comes from a slight place of privilege in that being an apprentice, there was an expectation that you knew nothing. So it was completely fine to ask even the most obvious questions because you knew absolutely nothing. But I've held on to that the whole way through. And I think that served me really, really well. So definitely asking questions and being open to that. And the second, I think, is around the concept of radical candor and feedback. I think for a period of time, when I first joined corporate, for about the 18 months after that, I really struggled with receiving feedback, negative feedback, because I built my stack of evidence and I was like, right, I'm great. And then I moved into a role that meant I had no idea what I was doing again. And I was like, oh, maybe I'm not. And I took a little bit of a hit on that and I found it really difficult because I was like, no, I've got this stack of evidence that says I'm great at this. And you're telling me I'm not. Like that doesn't match up. And so for a long time I was batting away what was really useful feedback that probably would have helped me to grow and develop much faster. But I was really uncomfortable with taking that. And at the point where that switched and I realized that actually I can have a mixture of both. I can take feedback on and I can learn from it and I can grow from it without taking it to heart, without holding on to it, without making it about me as such. That's when I was able to grow loads. And now it's something I actively seek out all the time from our clients, from the team internally, from my team, from random people I meet at events that happen to see me speak, etc. Because everything that they say, I can now go, okay, yeah, that feels true. That feels like something that I could work on. Or actually that feels like it's coming from a place where maybe there is some envy, maybe it's something else, and I can push that feedback away. But that I think the ability to take feedback, but also to go out and seek it, and the ability to continue being curious and ask questions.
Wow, I love those. Love those takeaways. So we firstly got ask the silly questions, the simple questions, whatever the questions are, don't be
Absolutely.
afraid to ask because you're going to get there quicker as well, right? Sometimes I think we think we're supposed to know it all, but actually asking the question is going to be quicker than trying to figure that out on your own. And then
Hmm.
secondly, radical candor. I love it. Seeking feedback, getting comfortable with feedback, it can only help you grow and develop and just bringing awareness to it. Brilliant, brilliant takeaways,
Definitely.
Kayleigh. Tell me, if there's a piece of music or a book that kind of sums up Kayleigh Graham at Telleroo.
Oh god, that's a good one. I think a lot of the things that I talk about and passionate about etc. Or a lot of it goes back to some of the key concepts in Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In,
Okay.
which, if you don't want to read the whole book, highly recommend the TED Talk for anyone listening. That's a shorter version of said book. But in there, she talks about leaning in, about sitting at the table and being part of the conversation, about, she's got a concept called don't leave till you leave, which is more related to women having children and taking a step back, but actually is pivotable into other areas around actually just driving forward and keeping your foot on the accelerator until you really need to take that break. So yeah, I think that it's very much focused around women in business, the challenges that we have, and how we sometimes get in our own way.
Brilliant recommendation. And music?
Oh, that's a good one.
What's your jam?
Music, I'm all over the place, I am. Music-wise, well, fun fact, I'm actually named after a song, so we could go with that one. The song is
Okay.
Kayleigh by Marillion, so we could go with
Okay.
that. Because I am named after that. Otherwise, oh, I don't know. I think if I was to put myself into a song, it's whatever song you think of that would make you get up and dance. I think that's the song I am to whoever is listening, is that song, right? Because I think that's the thing I'm really good at, is getting people up and motivated to do something and bringing energy.
I love it. You've got so much energy. The pace is brilliant. Really great takeaways. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. I really appreciate your insights. You have been joined by Kayleigh Graham. Thank you.